The guillotine was an execution device which was made famous during the French Revolution, but it would be used inside of Nazi Germany to condemn many different people who were accused of treason against Hitler's government. But at the end of the Second World War, the guillotine would be used to execute some people accused of crimes that occurred inside of the concentration camps. One such man was Erich Zoddel, a 32-year-old prisoner functionary who worked at and was held inside of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Zoddel's story was one which was unique at the end of the Second World War, and he would be accused of murdering another prisoner based on the fact she would not agree to go on a date with him. But the setting for this was one of the most barbaric concentration camps used by the Nazis, and Zoddel's actions led to one more death inside of the camps. Join us today as we look at the horrific guillotining of Erich Zoddel, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. During the Second World War, there were many prisoners who were recruited inside of the concentration camps to work as capos or prisoner functionaries. These were in a sense a number of prisoners who were given some power to lord over the other inmates, and they would often be targeted at the end of the conflict, and many were seen as collaborators with the guards. Many capos were beaten to death when the camps were liberated, but Erich Zoddel was born in August 1913 in Berlin, and he was a prisoner of the concentration camps who would not necessarily be incarcerated by the Nazi policies and race laws. He was a common criminal, and because of this was sent to the camps. Specifically in 1941, he was imprisoned for a year for theft, and he would then in 1942 be sent to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. He was held inside of Sachsenhausen for some time, before he was then forced to conduct labour inside of a Heinkel factory, making aeroplane parts for the German war effort inside of Oranienburg. But he was yet again moved to Buchenwald concentration camp, and then Mittelbau-Dora. With this, Erich Zoddel, despite being only sentenced to a year in prison, was a prisoner inside many of the most horrific and brutal Nazi concentration camps. But like many other prisoners, he would be sent towards Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Belsen, in its final days of its operations, was a sorry overcrowded state, as thousands of prisoners were sent there to try and keep them out of the hands of the enemy, and because of this the conditions broke down. But Erich Zoddel was there for over a year, and he would rise throughout the ranks of the prisoners at the camp. He was trusted by the SS and would have been involved in keeping the prisoners in check. However, the crime that Erich Zoddel was accused of and would ultimately be sent to his execution for would be carried out after the liberation of Bergen-Belsen. When the British entered the camp on the 15th of April 1945, they found around 13,000 unburied bodies and around 60,000 inmates who were suffering and dying. Many were very sick, and they had been without food or water for days. Amongst the prisoners, they also found a number of SS guards who remained there, including Irma Grazer, Elizabeth Volkenrath, and the Beast of Belsen, commandant of the camp, Josef Kramer. A British reporter stated of the scenes that, "Here over an acre of ground lay dead and dying people. You could not see which was which. The living lay with their heads against the corpses, and around them moved the awful, ghostly procession of emaciated, aimless people, with nothing to do and with no hope of life, unable to move out of your way, unable to look at the terrible sights around them. Babies had been born here, tiny, wizened things that could not live. A mother driven mad screamed at a British sentry to give her milk for her child, and thrust a tiny mite into his arms, and then ran off, crying terribly. It was hell on earth, and the British would then use the guards to help clean up the bodies, but around 170 of the capos and prisoner functionaries, who were in league with the SS and the guards, like Erich Zoddel, had been killed and were turned on by the inmates. On the 18th of April 1945, following the liberation, Erich Zoddel pulled out his weapon and he shot a female prisoner named Maria Konakowicz. He would state Maria was his girlfriend. However, others claim that Zoddel had threatened the woman as she rejected his romantic advances. She refused to date Zoddel on the basis that he was German and Maria was Polish, but allegedly Erich could not handle this. He would later state in his trial that Maria Konakowicz was my girlfriend at Belsen camp. She had been my girlfriend since April the 12th. She was shot on April the 18th between 10 and 11 p.m. She came to my house at 9 p.m. that night, and I went with her to the camp. I was with her when the shots were fired. The shots were fired immediately outside her building, the first block on the right-hand side when entering the main gate, in front of the block where she had been living. I do not remember its actual number. I was coming out from my house, from the prisoners' camp, with Maria, walking in the direction of the canteen, where there was a dance to which we wanted to go. Just as we arrived at the canteen, the lights went out. As we therefore could not dance, we went off to her block when a tall Russian, whose name I do not know, came up. He had a girl on his arm. I would not know her, but I would know him again. When he got near us, he pulled out a revolver, pointed at us and said, "That's the end now." Then he fired 2 shots, one which struck me in the back of the neck and one killed Maria. I lay on the ground next to her. The Russian ran into the block. The girl who'd been with the Russian bent down, pushed me on one side and said to the Russian that I was dead. After they'd gone, I got up and went to another block. Someone was looking for me with an electric torch, so I went through the window and went to the tool store where I gave myself up to the British. I told them the whole story. A sergeant took me to the commandant to have my wound dressed. I had my clothes searched. I was put on a lorry and driven to Bergen, to an officer. He said it was up to me and released me at midnight. So I was driven back to Belsen with 2 soldiers as a protective escort and taken back to my block and ordered to report to the commandant again the following day. I only remained there 2 more days, then 2 soldiers and a captain came to me and took me into custody. I do not know why. Zoddel continued to state, "That day I was dressed in blue trousers, a brown waistcoat of sheepskin and an overcoat. I was not wearing jackboots. I did possess a pair. It was dark and there was an air raid warning on. I was, at the end, spokesman number 3 at the camp. I did not think I had any enemies, otherwise I would have been taken away on the day the SS were. The man in charge of my block told me not to walk out after dark because it would not be safe because the other inmates were hunting down Germans. 2 others who worked with me in the kitchen had been killed the day before. It was impossible to leave the camp. One could have escaped through the wire fence if hell-bent on escaping. It was possible that way. After my arrest, all the other Germans beat it." He claimed that he was shot before Maria and that a Russian fired the bullet into him and said, "That's the end now." His lawyers tried to claim that the witness testimony against him was nonsense, but it would clear things up. One witness would state of Zoddel's crime that, "I remember a girl called Maria. I remember her death, which took place after the British came, about 13 or 14 days afterwards. I was by building number 201 when her death took place. Inside the building, standing by the window. It was evening time. Maria was walking with a man when Zoddel approached them, fired twice, and Maria fell down. I identify Zoddel in court. Maria was at that time walking in front of the building. Accused approached them from behind. He fired twice and Maria fell down. He had the pistol in his pocket. After he fired, Maria fell to the ground. Her companion was wounded as well and was taken to hospital. He did not fall down but disappeared. I hurried out of the building and found Maria lying in a pool of blood in front of the building. She was dead. I could not stay there long, so I went away. I do not exactly know where she was hit, but it was somewhere in the head. I did not see if she was hit anywhere else in her body, because she was taken away with her clothes on. Her body was covered in a blanket. I do not remember what day of the week this was. The day before, Maria had told me that Erich had threatened he would kill her, because he had fallen in love with her, but she would not go out with him, because he was a German and she was a Pole. It was claimed that after he fired the shots, Zoddel disappeared, and he could not be found, but when he was allegedly wearing jackboots, and that Zoddel apparently was identifiable as he wore the armband of the chief Kapo. There were some witnesses who spoke out for Erich, but those defences were rejected. Others claimed that he only wanted to frighten Maria with his pistol, that he did not want to kill the young Polish girl, and that this may have been actually a tragic accident, but this was rejected, and because of this, Erich Zoddel was found guilty of murder. He was condemned to death by a military court in Scheller on the 31st of August 1945. On the 17th of November 1945, he was sentenced to life imprisonment during his second trial for his conduct at Bergen-Belsen, and the court found he had violently assaulted and beaten fellow prisoners whilst he was at the camp, and that in his role as a Kapo, he would beat the inmates with sticks very badly. But whilst he was in prison, his death sentence would be carried out. He was held in Wurfbüttel prison, and on the 30th of November 1945, The 32-year-old Erich Zoddel was led out of his prison cell and into the execution chamber. He was not to be hanged for murder, as his conviction was under German civilian code, and because of this, he was to be executed on the guillotine. The famous execution device in Germany was actually known as a Fallbeil, and it was adapted and made from mostly metal, as opposed to the guillotine in France, which was mostly wooden except for the blade. But the German executioners became known for their ruthless efficiency, and they would execute in a matter of seconds. Zoddel had his identity confirmed in the execution chamber before the assistant secured his hands and legs, and he would then be secured onto a metal board using a variety of straps. He was then slid under the guillotine blade, and once everything was checked, the blade was released, and his head was taken clean off, which then fell into a basket at the foot of the device. Erich Zoddel was one of a few German people who was executed on the guillotine at the end of the Second World War, but he was accused of war crimes and also murdering a young woman who turned down his romantic advances. It was a callous act of cold-blooded killing, and he could not cope with rejection and lied that a Russian had instead shot his girlfriend, but this was not the case, and Maria was not even his girlfriend. His victim was just one of thousands of victims and prisoners who perished inside of the walls of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.